All right, welcome back. Another session of Looking for Work. Today I'm going to talk a little bit about networking. I think it's one of the critical aspects of the job search that a lot of folks overlook, and this is where majority of the entry level opportunities exist by tapping the network, right? And most of these opportunities, it's very rarely that you'll see like a posting for an entry level software engineering, entry level data engineering role. It's much more likely that folks inside of an organization will tap their friends and folks that they know might be interested, and they get this sort of inside track on those jobs as the opportunities are created. And what generally happens is, you have an organization that's growing, and they may feel like now's the time for them to be able to bring on a few early career folks, groom them, and have sort of a bench of talent that can grow within the organization. So a couple of things that I think are going to be super helpful, and please, by all means, drop some questions. If you have a question in the comments, they'll come to me. More than happy to stop and answer questions as they come through. But I kind of wanted to cover where you should be networking, so we can kind of facilitate some very tangible ways that you can be proactively growing the number of folks that you could potentially be leveraging their network as well, and kind of building on the capacity that you have by just really putting yourself out there and maximizing the number of opportunities that you'll have to just be in the know. And then in addition to where you should be sort of like placing yourself and where you should be trying to connect with folks, I'll talk a little bit about the how. The how is the part that a lot of folks have a lot of like challenges with, because many folks, especially in STEM careers, we tend to be less creative and more on the science side. And so that creative part of like, how do I go about messaging and reaching out to people might just take a little prompting, but you can get there for sure. You can absolutely get there. Even for someone like me, I get social anxiety. So I'll tell you that I am, like many other people in tech space, I wouldn't say I'm deathly afraid of talking to other people, but it's not something that I would choose to do if I didn't know how valuable it was, not only for myself, but I also think that when I network, I'm helping other people because I'm bringing maybe a different viewpoint, a different perspective to the table that may not be in the room. Well, let me say, it generally is not in the room unless I'm at a Blackson Tech conference or a monthly meetup of the Blackson Tech chapter. Other than that, I'm usually the person with the most melanin in the room if I'm around software engineers and leadership, right? Folks that are tech leaders. And let's be brave and just name it, right? This is not a space where there's a ton of diversity, and I think that means that there's a lot of opportunity for organizations to find talent in places that they currently have not been looking and currently have not been able to sort of attract and retain. So networking. Here's what I would suggest. I would suggest there's an old term of art, but it actually may result in you finding communities that are the most active and seasoned in terms of true networking. And so these are called SNUGs, special interest user groups. And in some cases, like ServiceNow user groups or SNUGs, right? So if you look in your local community for user groups, and again, special interest user groups or user groups that are, this is just, again, a term that used to be more popular. These days, you may hear the term meetup, and that's because of the popularity of the meetup website. And you will even hear like Slack communities. These are all places where you can right away start to plug yourself into a network of people that have a lot of experience and are traditionally the first ones to know about these kinds of opportunities that might arise for an early career developer. So I'll pause for a second. Hey, Matthew, great to see you here. You posed the question, is it better to be upfront or get to know the person? I definitely think you want to be human. And so the first thing that you want to do is definitely try and get to know the person and maybe a little bit about their background, what they work on. And so I guess I'll skip to the icebreakers. A lot of the icebreakers that I use at a meetup when I'm meeting someone for the first time might be, I'll ask them, so what do you do? And that will usually give them an opportunity to talk about the fact that they're a student, that they're looking for work, or that they're transitioning in careers, or that they're a software engineer in the field, and this is where they work, and this is the type of work that they do. It's a very soft and easy conversation starter to just ask the person to talk about themselves versus you having to think of ideas and things for you to discuss. So if you ask the person, hey, so what do you do? What kind of work do you do? Right? Super easy, open-ended question, and it's not a closed-ended question. A closed-ended question is like something that could be answered in a yes or no, or with a number, like how many years have you been programming? That's a very closed-ended question, right? But if you can ask the person, hey, so how much experience do you have in whatever the theme of the night was? If it's a JavaScript monthly meetup, hey, how much experience do you have with JavaScript? Right? Easy conversation starters. So I guess when you say get to know them, I think it should be getting to know them in the context of software engineering. So I wouldn't probe them for like super personal questions like, hey, are you married? Right? So you want, this is a professional event, and so your question should really be around growing that professional network. So hopefully that helps with like the way I usually approach just sort of like making light conversation when you're in that networking environment where there's a ton of people and there's an opportunity for you to start connecting with folks. So the first thing I usually suggest is try to find those like rich environments where there's going to be lots and lots of people that are there specifically for the purpose of networking. So that could be going to a webinar, right, where there are people that are there and they're sort of looking forward to the breakout session in the portion of time where you're getting a chance to meet, and maybe it could be a specific theme around the webinar. Like it could be around mentorship, and there's a bunch of volunteers that are there. So earlier this month, I was a participant in Athena has a mentorship fest, I guess is the best way to describe it. And so there was a bunch of mentors, and we rotated around and talked to lots of women in STEM that were looking to kind of get insight into becoming leaders in STEM. And so that, again, was an opportunity for those individuals to specifically get mentorship and build a professional network. And so out of that, I got lots of people that reached out to me afterwards and said, hey, would love to connect with you and stay connected. And so I think for the most part, finding those situations that you can place yourself in where you've got lots of folks that are interested and already coming to the table for the purpose of networking is kind of like step one in terms of finding avenues to efficiently network, right? The less efficient are going to be if you go to a webinar and you don't have access to the whole room, but you might have a situation where you've got a list of participants. And so sometimes if there's just a list of participants, while the conversation is going on, I might just copy paste and search each of them on LinkedIn and see if I can find out, hey, are there any that have an interesting background that I might want to reach out to? And then it's super easy because you can just say, hey, I saw you attended the webinar earlier today. Super interested in connecting. Then boom, you've got that connection request out, and you've got pretty easy context to build a conversation around, right? So Matthew, you dropped a couple comments in here. So the second one you said is start off that way. If they're super closed off, not interested in talking, just move on. Yeah, I've never seen anybody and never really been around an environment where someone just got completely snubbed and they were just like, I don't want to talk to you. And they just like turn their back and walk away. It's very rare. So I think in most cases, if they're not interested in talking, if they don't say very much, then you could say, hey, I'm gonna mingle. I'm gonna go get a drink. Just eject and move on. Kind of count your blessings that they didn't suck you in the mouth, right? So that said, I also super encourage people when they go to a networking event, sometimes they'll show up to a meetup with their friends, and then they'll spend a lot of time meeting with their friends. And so I always encourage people, like, I know it's your circle of comfort to hang out with people that you came with, but it's way more important that you spend as much time as you can meeting other people. And realistically, like when we were doing monthly meetups for the JavaScript community, there'd be about 80 to 100 people that would show up for a meetup. And so realistically, if you sort of have genuine conversation and you're talking to someone for a little bit, you're only going to get to meet half a dozen people at most. And it's likely mostly random, right? It will, unless you meet like an organizer and the organizer can say, oh, let me introduce you, and they introduce you to like 2 or 3 different people, it's the people you're going to meet are going to be very random. So you might meet other peers that are just like you, that are looking for their first opportunity. You might meet individuals that are inside organizations, and maybe they're not a hiring manager or an internal champion, but they're a nice person to interact with and get to know, and again, build that relationship. So you're going to get an opportunity. And so that's why I would suggest, to your point, if conversation isn't going anywhere, to just move on and circulate in the room, because you're going to miss an opportunity to talk to somebody else that could have potentially been a pretty good connection. And if you spend too much time talking to someone that's not super helpful, even if you're having a good conversation and you're doing your networking thing, you're having a good conversation back and forth, keep your mental clock going, that you want to make sure that you're breaking up your time and getting a chance to move around and talk to other folks, so that you don't walk out at the end of the night and you've only met one person, you've had an interesting conversation. But instead, you really want to make sure that you're getting a chance, over an event, you'll probably get a chance to talk to 5 or 6 people, right? And if you're only talking to 1 or 2, you're doing something wrong, right? You want to make an adjustment to your process. How do you find groups? I would say Bay Area, you're going to have tons. I mean, you're in Silicon Valley, so you're going to have tons of different user groups, Slack communities. Look on Eventbrite, look on Meetup. That's where you'll see most people are scheduling events. But there could be other, in each region, there could be other ways that people communicate and disseminate, here's when events are happening. I've seen communities that use Craigslist. I've seen communities that use predominantly Facebook, right? And so it will just vary. But across all of those, I think you should find plenty of opportunities. There was a time here in San Diego prior to COVID where there was easily multiple meetups every night of the week. You had to choose. You could either go to this one, or there's like tons of different events that you could go to if you're just in the developer domain, not even across, product and UX and all of the other facets that might be part of tech. So I don't know of any specific in the Bay Area, but I'm confident there's tons. Meetups is like pretty much on pause in many communities. I think they're starting to kind of come back for a lot of the tech ones, because we usually needed a dark room with a projector. It hasn't translated as well to doing them like outdoors. But you'll occasionally see like groups that are still regularly meeting, and now they're doing like maybe a cocktail hour, and they'll do those, restaurants, outdoor seating, that kind of thing. I think it has changed the landscape of meetups in a positive way, though, in that for a lot of groups, they have been able to sort of like expand the number of participants that could get involved. Because I know for the San Diego JavaScript meetup group, we used to not do a great job of like trying to at the same time like broadcast or simulcast the live online so people could like attend virtually. It was logistically kind of hard, especially when we had a lot of speakers coming up and plugging in laptops, unplugging laptops. We never really got a good system dialed in to be able to do a real, genuine user could experience the same kind of experience from home as the users that were experiencing live, because that's hard. It is really hard to have the 2 experiences be kind of like in parity. So occasionally we would record them and post them afterwards, and occasionally we would try and do a live simulcast, but it's just not nearly the same as being there in person, or not having the distraction of the in-person event and really being able to produce a really good virtual event. It's really hard to pull off both at the same time. That said, with everything having gone virtual, I'm seeing really great uses of the virtual space to bring people in that otherwise wouldn't be able to go, to attend multiple events. So now you could go to 2 or 3 meetups because there's no drive time between the 2. So you go to a meetup at 4, you go to another one at 5, you go to another one at 6, if they're all virtual. So I think COVID has changed meetups in a positive way by making it way easier for people to go as a consumer and as someone that like wants to go and just participate, way easier to access. As a speaker, makes it easier because you can now deliver your talk from the comfort of your own home, and you can deliver to a bunch of different groups. And that before it was just not possible. So if I want to give a talk to like a group in Silicon Valley, I had to go to San Francisco, right? Now you just zoom in, right? And you're good to go. So I think it has changed meetups. It has also, because of just the stress of COVID, meant that a lot of the speakers and the folks that are involved and volunteers and just the community in general is a little bit more stressed. So I think the frequency of meetups has precipitously dropped off. But I think that's natural given that this is not what most people do as their job. Their job is not to produce, talks and speaking events and things like that. And they have jobs and families and other things going on. And so I just think the number of meetups in each community might have declined. Like San Diego JavaScript meetup group, we used to have 8 or 9 in-person meetups a month, 8 or 9 a month. And now I think we do like 3 or 4 virtual per month. So it's cut in half. But we've increased the number of people that can attend those meetups because they're all online, 100% of them. So I think we'll start to kind of slowly see people coming back to in-person events. But in the meantime, I don't think people should make that a barrier to their opportunity to network. And instead, I think they should see it as a way that you can increase your network. And now you can connect with folks in your local community as well as all across the country. There's some fascinating talk about, the Austin meetup community or the developers in Boston. And like, there used to not really be a great way for you to have access to those communities. Now you do. Right? Now you do. Brooklyn JS, right? You can attend a Brooklyn JS event. You don't have to be in Brooklyn. So I think the landscape now for networking means you've got way more opportunities. So you just want to be efficient with your time. If I were looking for a job and we were in normal non-COVID times, I guess it's possible now that if you just check your calendars, that you could arrange to attend a virtual meetup or in-person meetup every night of the week. Every night. And I know some people are just like, wow, that's a lot. But that's what I was doing when I was working at a code school. That's what I was doing when I was software engineer volunteering and community organizer in the evenings. I would attend a meetup just about every night, especially my involvement in the San Diego JavaScript community. So that led to me constantly meeting new people that were just starting, looking for opportunities. That led me to meet lots of senior engineers and know, like, as soon as somebody was looking for, hey, I'm thinking about moving, like before they even quit their job, like you would know, oh, like you should talk to so-and-so. They're looking for an engineer. This would be a perfect opportunity. That's where the job opportunities are. They're not on like Indeed. They're not on Monster. They're not on Dice. They're on, you meet people and the person's like, yeah, I'm not really happy. Like, I think it's time for me to make a change. Boom, that person's on the market, right? And at that point, I think there's a tremendous opportunity for then usually what you do is you're like, hey, you should come work for us. You should work at our, and you can really pitch the person and tell them like, hey, like, let me talk to the hiring manager. Let's see if we can get you onto one of the teams here. And then it becomes like a pitch fest. Everybody's just like, hey, did you hear the so-and-so is looking for a new spot? That's the reality of how people usually kind of move around. It's, slightly different now with the variety of opportunities for folks. There's a platform called Hired that kind of like took that concept and basically said, hey, rather than you having to go out and search for jobs, you can jump onto the platform, describe who you are and your skill set, and then they would sort of like place you in front of employers, and employers could make offers and all that kind of stuff. But in essence, it's really just a spin on networking, right? They're just creating an environment for that networking to kind of happen, which is not uncommon from how you should think about the job of looking for a job when you're trying to break into tech. this is the path of least resistance, even though emotionally and mentally it may be challenging for you to come up with like a creative way to connect with someone on LinkedIn, right? So when you're doing that, when it's not in person and instead it's like, hey, I'm just trying to reach out to somebody that's at an organization because I know that they either are on the engineering team or they might know someone on the engineering team of a company that I'm applying for. The question people often ask is, what should I say in my reach out messages? Sometimes the best thing is nothing. Just try and connect. Just send a connection request, right? And then once they connect with you, now you have the ability where now you could craft a message. You can try and interact with the individual. But sometimes you could just send a message without a connection request, without a like text message. And it varies. Sometimes someone will like, I don't accept any requests if they don't send me a reason why they want to connect. But I tend to look at it like, when you get a connection request, I almost always look at the person's profile. And if I can see that they've put into their profile that they're a student, that they're early career, that they're looking, then I'll connect with them and see if they have any questions or if I can be helpful in any way. And so other individuals inside organizations may feel the same way. You know, if you have a connection request or you reach out and say, hey, I'd love to learn more about your organization, love to learn more about the team you're on or the role that you do, all those kinds of things. I think most people are going to be generous with their time in terms of just make sure that you are asking them more closed-ended questions when you're reaching out to them and it's not in person. So let me say that one more time. If it's in person, you want to ask open-ended questions because you want to start a conversation and you want to have a dialogue. You want to get to know the person. You want to give them some space to feel like they can share a little bit, see what your reaction is, and you share it a little bit, and they see what your reaction is, and so you have like an organic conversation. But when you're trying to connect with somebody, then you want to ask more closed-ended questions, questions that can be answered easily so that you can begin to have a back and forth dialogue. And the other reason why I think it's helpful to do that is because we're often busy. And so when I get on LinkedIn, I don't often have the time to get into a deep conversation. But if I'm on LinkedIn really quickly because I'm killing a little bit of time and I see a message from someone and it's something that I can answer really quickly, I'm more likely to respond right away. So you are more likely to get a response when you're reaching out on LinkedIn if you keep it short. And if you're going to ask a question, you should ask a closed-ended question, something that can be answered in like just a few words or in a very definitive sentence, not what's the best way to get a job in tech, right? Like, I don't have time to answer that question ever. I'm going to tell you, you should probably join my looking for work sessions on Tuesdays, right? So by asking a more narrow question, you will shorten the amount of time it takes for the person to respond to you. So make it easy. When you're networking, it's all about keeping it simple and making it easy for the other person to like start developing and having a conversation. That's really all you need is like, you're just going to kickstart a conversation. And then from there, you can discover if this person is someone that you can add value to. And I'm always like, how can I add value for this other person? And it's not so that you can get something else in return. It's literally just so you can help as many people as possible. And then sometimes it'll be helpful for you. And the person might say, hey, I think that you actually are pretty sharp for an early career person. I think you should definitely apply for this role. And, you know, I know somebody on the team, et cetera. You get lucky. You'll find an internal champion that will sort of be an ally for you. And, you know, hopefully you can go further and be a sponsor and help you get through that process, the hiring process. So I'm going to pause and see if anybody has any other questions. I know I've been talking quite a bit, but I think getting over the fears and having some tangible ways that you can approach networking is going to be super valuable because it is one of the most important things. After having those foundational skills for an entry-level role, the job and the task that you primarily have to deal with is networking. Without that, without effective ways for you to reach folks, there's no one for you to sell your skills to. And then last is you got to sell your skills. You got to say, these are all the reasons why I would be the best next hire for your organization. Because here's the things that I can add. And it could be a scrappiness, a curiosity, no quit attitude. You love to learn, like all of those attributes, which are what they truly are looking for. Not someone that knows hooks, right? I mean, hooks are cool. But that's not why people are getting hired. They're getting hired because they have all of those communication, all of that collaboration, problem solving skills, and someone sees that if they're given enough experience and enough support in 1 or 2 years, they're going to be like a seasoned vet and be able to just crush it. They know you can't do that now. They understand that. That's understood. But what's your capacity? Where do they think they'll be if they just give you a little bit of support for a year or two? Situational question. I like it. In your networking, you met someone that told me to get into mainframe. Is there a lack of people in that field? I really enjoy web development. Foot in the door be better than just okay. So the gist of what you're asking is like, should I learn Cobol? Right. Cobol is one of those like mainframe programming languages, and I would say it depends. If you're okay with the fact that it's going to be a 2-year run, 3-year run, where you're going to have to get a foot in the door, be on the team there for a little while, add a lot of value because you want to make sure you're adding value, and then you can make that next step. And so it's a solid way to come in and in the first few years make a really good amount of money and be in demand. So, so I would say, sure, for those folks that have the stomach for it, and you can work on mainframe software and platforms, yeah, I would do it. If I had a choice, do it all over again. And again, one of those languages and technology, one of those languages is Cobol. Cobol is still used by a lot of banks, a lot of government institutions, folks that need something that's just going to work and just keep working and just be working. And it might not be the fastest system, but it is a system that allows a lot of access to a lot of people and a lot of stability. And so, yeah. But not everybody has the patience for that, right? You got to kind of know going into it, it's going to be a couple of years and you're going to make a decent amount of money. And then you'll get to do the funner stuff that you probably will want to do, because it's not going to seem very fun after a while, because it's going to be a lot of the same, because it hasn't changed in like the last 40 years, 50 years. And most people that are getting into software engineering is you want to solve new problems. You want to be working on things that are, modern. You want to be learning a lot, and you won't be learning a lot once you get into that field. You'll learn there'll be a plateau pretty quickly, and then it will feel like you're learning very gradually and you're not progressing much, but you'll be paid very well because there's such a shortage of that talent, because most of the folks that are maintaining mainframes in Cobol are folks that have been doing this for a long time and they're needing to retire or they're dying. So like one of those two things is going to happen. You're going to retire, you're going to die. Hopefully you retire before you die. And that's, not fun, not super exciting, but it's a job, and it's like very technical. You're going to have to learn Cobol. You're going to have to learn different systems. There are going to be some things that you're going to need to pick up, but then you're going to get into like a maintenance mode really fast, and you'll be mostly maintaining and just doing, minor updates and just keeping everything alive. And yeah, not nearly as fun, but it is a stable job and get a lot of experience. Yeah, because you're going to be talking to customers and end users that need data and they need modifications of the system. And maybe, and I don't want to put this out there, I'm going to just be very, very clear about the fact that just a small infinitesimal chance that you get onto a team where you're working on a Cobol project and they're going to do a fresh rewrite and they're going to migrate off of Cobol and onto something else. But I would not keep your hopes up for that, because most of them are on it because there's really not a reason for them to invest in the millions of dollars it might take to get them off of Cobol and onto some modern tech stack. It's way too expensive. Yeah, it's definitely, I would say Cobol, yeah, boring would be a good way to describe it. And yeah, but the jobs aren't going anywhere. And imagine you're like a bank and all your systems are all on these mainframes, and it's going to cost you millions of dollars to migrate off of it. But it would cost you like a fraction of that to just maintain them every year. Where are you going to maintain them every year? Why are you going to invest all that money to just reinvent the wheel? If it still works, just keep the machine going. No reason to reinvent it. Yeah. That's what I'm talking about. 20 years ago. But 20 years ago was still just 2000. I mean, a lot of these systems have been around since the early 80s. So they were talking about 40-year-old. They could have like installed the first bits of hardware and just been doing hardware updates, a little bit of software updates for the last 40 years. And you can imagine someone's been doing it for 40 years. It's time for them to retire, which again creates an opening because they're not really teaching this much, right? I don't know of any CS degree programs that are really focused on like mainframe computing. Mostly people are more interested in things that are a little bit more theoretical in like the future, where we might be going with things like quantum computing, right? So there's way more people that are interested in quantum computing. I just don't know that there's definitely not a job market there for quantum computing, but I don't know what the market is going to look like in terms of like that really opening up and creating lots of opportunity for people. So you'd have way better luck moving backwards than you would moving forwards in terms of the technology opportunities for an early career developer. When you're in later phases and you've been coding for a while and you're a senior engineer, principal engineer, an architect, at that phase, you want to be on the lookout for like what's next, and you want to be like starting to kind of understand what is the future of quantum computing. What does that look like, so that you're prepared for when the need arises to start migrating from what you're using over there. But yeah, IBM still manufacturing lots of that hardware. Interestingly enough, they even created some ways that you can run some of the loads that are typically run on mainframes in the cloud, but they even say like, and we'll help you migrate back when it doesn't work. So it's like, it's not something where everybody's just going to kind of like suddenly turn off these mainframes and migrate all of this into clouds and, cloudless function or stateless functions and all that. It's like it's not going to happen. They're not going to move from mainframe to Kubernetes. It ain't happening. So there you go. Networking in real live action, Matthew. That's how it's done. Well done. Bravo. All right. I think, unless there's any other questions, we're going to pause here for this week, and we will pick this up next week. Same bat time, same bat channel. Yeah, I think this format of me kind of having a topic, I think might be helpful for folks. But if you have questions, please feel free, drop them in the comments. I'll hang out here for a minute or two, see if there's any more questions, and then we'll do this every Tuesday. And it's my way to try and give back a little bit, help some people out that are in that first phase of trying to make that what is probably the most challenging part of the transition. It's the first job, landing the first job in tech, because once you've landed that first one, even if it's working on something super ancient like mainframes and Cobol, it'll open up all these other opportunities, and then it'll be like super easy. Would I say that working with a recruiter would be helpful entry level tech as bootcamp graduates and lives? No. So unfortunately, the deal with recruiters are that recruiters are typically compensated based on placing a candidate into a role, and they're compensated as a percentage of that person's like first year salary. So let's say I'm a senior software engineer, and out in the marketplace I could make, let's say, $150,000 a year, and they might get 20% of my first year salary. So 20% of my first year salary is going to be roughly $30,000. So they would make $30,000 if they can find me a job. But as a junior engineer, if I was a recruiter, if I placed a junior engineer, they would not pay me a 20% markup. Even though it's like only 20% of like, let's say 60 grand, they still wouldn't even pay that. So it's like, do I help a junior engineer and I'm going to make no money? Or do I place a senior engineer, potentially make $30,000 by just telling him, hey, you should go apply over here. And then they apply and they get the job and the recruiter gets $30,000. Nice deal, huh? So that said, I think there's nothing wrong with talking to a recruiter and seeing if they can provide you help with like your resume or suggestions about ways that you can maybe, if you get lucky enough that they'll give you like a mock interview. We've got lots of recruiters that have been involved with, coming in and talking to our classes and doing resume reviews and doing sort of like some discussions around the interview process, etc. But you're not their customer. You're not their ideal person. From a customer perspective, there's you can't afford the product, or you're not the product that they're looking for, is the best way for me to kind of like describe why it's very unlikely that a recruiter is going to be helpful for you until you have 2 or 3 years under your belt. Once you've been on the job for a while, they would love to be able to help you go from like mid-level at one company to a senior engineer somewhere else. And that's a huge win for them. But not many of them are willing to make an investment of like helping someone for 3 years until they get to that point. So it's a little too early for recruiters. Any other questions? All right. Well, thank you everybody for joining, and thanks Jessica for your great question. And I will be back next week. Whoop. Christiana's late joining, but can I reiterate the networking skills that pay the bills? Oh yes, the networking skills that pay the bills. There's really the two parts, right? So it's where you should go, right? Key is going to be putting yourself in a position where it's like there's a ton of opportunity. There's a ton of people that are available for you to talk to. So that means going to the meetups, going to the special interest user groups, joining virtually. So workshops, webinars, those may be opportunities where there might be a breakout room. You get a chance in a breakout room to get to meet 3 or 4 people in a short period of time. But the idea that when you're in that environment, you should be able to very quickly start having conversations. And it's really about conversation starters, asking people like maybe who do they work for? Or you could ask, what kind of work do they do? Or you could ask what your background is in. And those are great conversation starters, open-ended questions. Then if you're on the other side, the other networking skills that pay the bills are if you are trying to reach out to people via like LinkedIn or on Twitter or on any of the other like social media, then it's about asking maybe short, closed-ended questions and trying to kind of begin a dialogue and connect with them. So you can also, another way to get onto someone's radar, and I forgot this one, this one's great. This is a little bit more long tail, meaning the process is a little bit longer, is you can like, comment, and support some of like the work that they're putting out there. If they're creatives and they're putting a lot of work out, or you just want to, give the guy or girl props, right? And just be like, yo, that's pretty cool. I love the article that you just wrote on Medium, right? A lot of software engineers write blogs. And so commenting on a blog post or following them on Twitter after you read a blog post and commenting, great ways for you to start that dialogue, right? Everybody loves to have someone, give them a little pat on the back. And so those are awesome ways for you to create that initial, right? Then it's just about nurturing it. It's just about saying, hey, I noticed that you work at such and such a company. That's really great. And hopefully they're doing good, amazing things that you can then sort of like talk about and your interest in that. And then you can share, here's some things that you're working on. I went to a coding boot camp. I'm working on passion projects. I'm really interested in being in this space and I like working on this, etc. So commenting on posts, money, because they get a notification. And that's one where it's like, oh man, without even asking for the connection, if you just comment on the post, they might see your comment, they might reach out and connect with you. You've taken all the work out of it. You say, hey, this is a great post. Hey, thanks for sharing. And a hey, thanks for sharing could get you into like this circle now where suddenly that person is 1 or 2 degrees away from like a job opportunity. And so you have to do it at scale. You got to constantly be doing it. But that's how you get across that threshold of like where are the jobs? Where do I can sometimes people ask this, like, how do I apply for 10 jobs a week? How do I find 10 good jobs to apply for? Part of it is beginning to build that network so that the people that you're talking to can tell you where there are opportunities, and they'll remember, and they'll be like, oh, that's right, I was talking to this new career person, and then and then I hear that like, hey, someone's hiring early career folks, and then I'll ping them and be like, hey, just so you know, these folks just put up this job listing. I know Christiana real well, and she's exactly like that. If you met her and you connected with her and she remembered like, oh, you got something about your background, and she saw something, she would definitely reach back out. So shout out to Christiana. So that said, I do think that there's tons of opportunity, but you definitely have to have your radar up, and you have to be thinking about where are their chances, and how do I, because you got to be a little bit more proactive about it than how most software engineers or most people that are, more STEM, more technically oriented may not be thinking about, being more creative and being more like gregarious or outgoing, right? Instead, if you're a little bit more reserved and a little bit more like, just social anxiety, and it's not really your jam, you have to be proactive about making the effort, and you got to treat it like it's a job. It's part of your job, right? So if you're in the restaurant space, part of your job, you might not like it. Part of your job might be busting tables. So you just got to get the tables bust, get the dishes in the back, right? And so it may not be your favorite part of the job, but it's part of the process if you want to get great opportunity quickly. If you're not willing to take those steps, you can still get a job, but yep. See, testify, Philip, testify. Absolutely, Christiana. Appreciate the love and support. Yeah, I talked about this last time. So if you missed last week's session, I talked all about resume, portfolio, your LinkedIn. And so check it out. It's on YouTube, and hit that subscribe button before you forget. So really make sure that like everything's dialed in. Change the little header image on your LinkedIn. Don't like leave that whatever the plain LinkedIn one is. That tells me like, yo, you're not on top of your game, man. It's not like you gotta go out and buy custom rims for your truck, but you don't want to leave the stock header on your portfolio. You got to customize that a little bit. Yeah, I like it. All right, settle down. What else? Any other questions, comments, concerns? I like the dialogue. We got it going now. So we will do this again next week. This is something I love, being able to kind of like jump in here and help people that are really just 1 or 2 tweaks away in the process. Make a couple adjustments in your process, and you'll go from saying, oh, no one's hiring, to like, oh man, I got this great offer. That quick. People are hiring junior engineers. So don't let your internal mechanisms tell you like that because you're not having success, that the fish aren't biting. The fish are biting. You got to adjust your fly. You got to adjust the bait. You got to make some adjustments. You got to pull up your anchor, move a little bit to the left or to the right, but the fish are biting. If you're not getting a bite, then you have to internally look at, okay, how can you change your process and adjust to make yourself a more appealing opportunity for people to like snag an early career person that has a huge growth trajectory ahead. And then you're going to sell that. This is how you're going to be the person that's, 5 years, most important person on the team. Getting the most stuff done, most curious, most interested in helping the customers, solving business problems. That's you. And then they'll be like, all right, let's do it. Let's do it. All right. That's it for this week. You are welcome, Philip and Christiana. Great seeing you. David, last minute. Any front end devs here? Need to. See, if you're here and you're doing networking, connect with David. Looking for front end devs, 2 at a time, 2-fisted. So, Jessica, absolutely. Keep your phone on, Jessica. I'm gonna give you a ring in just a bit. I did review your interview, so I will be reaching out to you shortly. Woodrow, yes, every one of these is recorded. They're on YouTube. Was the easiest way to find them, but they also get posted and they live in some kind of permanent fashion on Facebook and LinkedIn. You just have to dig for them. But if you go to YouTube, then you can subscribe, and then you'll just get some kind of notification. I'm sure the YouTube folks have got that dialed in by now. But yeah, once I do these things live, they get recorded forever. Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of videos out there. At some point I'm going to try and get like transcribe and turn them into a book or something. So, but for now, good casual. Put them on like double speed. Rip through a bunch of them. All right. Later, everybody.